Welcome back to another episode of the RAG podcast with me, Sean Anderson, the CEO and founder of Hoxo Media. This is the show where every single week I bring to you a story, an interview with one of the leaders of our global recruitment sector, often a recruitment owner, sometimes a supplier or an investor, who have given their time to discuss what they've been up to, how they've built award-winning or industry-leading recruitment agencies around the world, and where do they feel our sector is heading post-COVID-19. Today, I'm super excited to be joined by Logan Naidu. Logan is the CEO and founder of Dartmouth Partners. And along with an acquisition called Pure Search, they are sat around 180 recruiters, working with over 400 organizations. And yeah, they've been around since 2012. So there's a lot to talk about. So Logan, welcome to the RAG podcast.
Thanks, Sean. How you doing?
I'm all right, mate. I'm all right. I can hear your children in the background, but they're not.
Okay. Just on clock alert, they decide to kick off.
I know. Yeah. Well, it is. Well, no, it's not. It's too late for. They should have had their lunch break. They should be doing some work. But it is Easter holidays, isn't it? So
yeah. So they've been fed, watered, and sugared, and they're ready to keep going now for the next hour or so.
I don't envy you, mate. I do not envy you. Well, look, thanks for taking your time. I've given you a little intro there, mate. But if you do me a favor, for the listeners' benefit, tell us who you are and what you do in your own words.
Sure. So I'll correct you. My surname. It's Logan Naidu.
Sorry.
That's all right. Founder of Dartmouth Partners. We started the business in 2012. Have grown reasonably quickly across financial services front office, and acquired a business called Pure Search in September 2019. And as you said, total group headcount 180 people. Will grow pretty aggressively this year and look to potentially make further acquisitions over the next few years.
Wow. So yeah, let's just get into it. Let's get into the story, right? You've been. I'm looking at your background, and you started off. Did you start your world in financial services, working in corporate finance, etc.?
Yeah, so did 3 years in corporate finance, 3 long years, and realised really early on. Literally within the first 2 weeks that I wasn't cut out for it. And that's a pretty frightening experience. I had to stay a year in my first place. I had golden handcuffs in my first job. Moved to PwC. Spent 2 years there, feeling out of my depth and not really enjoying it, and then entered the happy world of recruitment.
So how did that happen? How do you go from working in a corporate finance organization to joining a recruitment business? What happened there?
Like most people, fell into the industry, but back in 2004, when I was leaving corporate finance, flexible working was very different to how we view it today. And one of the things that I wanted to do, I was thinking about becoming a vicar, funnily enough. And so I was incredibly shy. One of the things that the church I went to said to me, he said, you probably need to get a bit more confident. Met a bunch of recruiters. One of the guys offered me a job, said you can leave early on a Thursday to go to church, which sounded great to me. And I joined this eight-person recruitment business that had gone through 2 pre-packs and was falling apart as I joined it. But they offered me flexible working, so I said yes.
Wow. So what was the business called?
It was a firm called the Oxbridge Group.
The Oxbridge Group. Okay.
Yeah.
And what were you recruiting specifically?
I recruited what I knew, so recruited corporate financiers. So I placed a bunch of my ex-colleagues into other M&A houses. Spent a year there, and then left to set up on my own.
So yeah, I always envy people that say that. Yeah, I just went into recruiting what I knew, because I went from being a school teacher in 2011 to recruiting technology professionals into the Australian government. And I was like, it couldn't have got weirder for me. I was like, and I'd never even had a laptop really until I was like uni student. So when I was talking, when people were trying to explain applications versus infrastructure pre iPhone, I didn't even know what an app was. I was just like, yeah, this isn't working for me. I mean, I ended up doing well, and I stayed in that technology space, but I could imagine I'd have hit the ground running a lot faster if I'd have understood it. So you literally, how did you find, like you said, you were shy though. How did you find the outgoing nature of the roles, having to, proactively outreach to people and use your communication skills as the primary focus?
It's really interesting. Recruitment gets a lot of knocks, but one of the things it has got, it's got some pretty inspirational people. And I worked you get the good and the bad in equal measure. And I worked with a guy that was genuinely inspirational. Could sell the proverbial ice to Eskimos.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the bad came with that, where probably had some slightly underhand business ethics along the way. But working and seeing him for the first couple of months, really helped me come out of my shell a lot. I guess alongside that, having had 2 jobs in the space of 3 years out of university, and then a third one, and sort of pretty traditional Asian parents, I couldn't afford to fail at the next one. So that kind of puts a fire under you to make sure it works out.
Do you remember those moments where you made your first outreach, cold calls and things, and you're like, did you question what the hell am I doing at one point?
I didn't, but I remember being, you're very shaky, aren't you? I mean, the idea of making a cold call to anyone to sell anything, if you haven't done a sales job before, is completely alien. What you realize now is that you try and build rapport and have a conversation with someone, and it's actually quite straightforward, conceptually quite straightforward, and actually in practice quite straight. And if you've got something good to offer, they're gonna buy from you. If they're not interested, and move on.
Exactly. Don't take it personal. Do not take it personal. So you said a year into your recruitment career, you set your own firm up.
Yeah. So did that for a year. I built pretty well in my first year, and then January 2005 set up my first recruitment business at the ripe old age of 25.
Well, that was the age I was when I got into the sector. I just turned 25, or I was just turning 25 when I started in recruitment. So I can remember that world. So the business back then was known as, is it Cornell Partnership?
Yeah, Cornell Partnership. So
what was that? Tell us, how did you start it? Who were you with? Paint the picture for us. What was that like back then?
So January 2005, got a year's recruitment experience. We had two other co-founders who were broadly 15 years older than me. That came from the other business. As I said, it was slightly falling apart. So 3 of us in a cavernous serviced office, and this serviced office was the size of a football pitch, and it was dirt cheap. I think it was about £300 a month. What we didn't realise after we signed the lease is that most people had moved out, because they started pulling the building down, literally pulling it down.
Where was it?
About 2 months. It was just off Lower Thames Street. On the river near where Jeffreys are today, and they've just turned them into luxury apartments now. But I mean, dust coming down and that kind of stuff. But I mean, it was really fun, because you had a really massive office, 3 of us sitting there making cold calls to people, trying to introduce this business that vaguely sounded like it'd been around for a while. Yeah,
you came up with it. I think it's a strong name, Cornell Partnership. Where did that come from?
It wasn't me. We were trying to think. Like everyone, we were trying to think of a name that sounds like it has some heritage to it and been around. And partnership. Sounds like there's more than one of you. And Cornell, we nicked from one of the Ivy League universities, and you'll see there's a theme in our business names along the way.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I get that. So, the amount of people I've spoken, 200 episodes pretty much now, and I think 95% of them did something similar. They started off with couple of colleagues, couple of mates in a shed or a garage or a bedroom or a serviced office. And they, it's amazing how you're able to just pick up the phone and make things happen. How did that, can you remember how the first year went? Because you went from being, you're still quite a green recruiter really after a year. I know you would have been a bit more mature and you'd worked in the sector. There was things on your side, but I still couldn't imagine starting an agency after a year. So tell us how that first year actually went.
Yeah, I don't think you really know what you're doing in recruitment until you're about 7-8 years in. But the first year, the thing that I had, I've got great work ethic, and that was hardwired in from, I guess, pre-university from family, and then working in corporate finance, and the fear of failure just driving you onwards. So I remember you talking to Tom Glanville, talk about eating baked beans for months and months on end. And I couldn't face that, so we had to make this work pretty quickly. And I'd come off the back of my first year in recruitment. I built about 350, 360, and then our first month or first 2 months, we did about 100k.
Wow.
And that for me, I remember thinking, well, we've got our costs covered now. We've got this cheap office, no other costs. We've got our costs covered, and the rest we can go. And then I was always a pretty strong biller. Which was probably my downfall at the first business, but I built 500,000 in my second year of recruitment, then 1 million in my third. And by year 4,
Is that contract or perm or both?
All perm.
Wow, that's a big deal. What was the average deal value back then?
Yeah, it was scandalously small. I was probably about 12 to 15k. So
that's a hell of a lot of deals then to get to 1 million.
It was real volume, real volume. And the great thing you remember that when that was the go-go days of banking, right? So you have this market that was climbing like the clappers, and just one deal after another. You're not going to take the job. Okay, next one. They're going to offer you. Away you go.
Wow, that sounds. So, what was your life like back then at 25, 26 years old? What were you? Were you relatively settled, or were you enjoying the fruits of being a business owner at that age?
You're going into dark territory now. I was actually I probably fell into work pretty head on, and actually I got engaged and not married, but I got engaged just before we started the business, and got disengaged about a year later, because she just said, "Look, I didn't sign up for this kind of lifestyle. All you do is work." So yeah, look, we worked really hard in the first couple of years to get it off the ground.
It's tricky. Yeah, I can empathize with that. Literally, like, I met she's my ex now, my ex-wife. I met her when I was in recruitment at like my peak of billing, like earning about £200,000, and she's like, took her to Dubai on the first trip, and we did all sorts of stuff together, and she must have thought, this is great. And then a year later, I set up a business and went back down to baked beans level. To be fair to her, she was great in that first year. She just let me get on with it. But it is not easy. You've got to sacrifice things, right? You've got to make some real sacrifices. Well, you mentioned the two guys with you are 15 years older in age. Were they 15 years older in recruitment as well? Did they have a lot of experience that you could lean on and they could support you?
Yeah, they did have they had a lot more experience. I think, we talked about this previously, but I think one of the things that you've got to work out is really early on is what do you want to do with your business, and do you have a shared vision? And I think we were, all okay recruiters, but we were running it without a real idea of what we were going to do with the business. Running it as sort of traditional lifestyle business. We got to 30 people. After you build a mill, what are you going to do next? Try and do it again. What happens next? So by the age of 30, I was kind of pretty bored with the business. I wanted to grow a really big business, and they didn't. Fundamentally, we were making £1.5 million profit a year, and like a lot of recruiters, they thought of it as like a cash machine, right? So why do we want to get it any bigger than this? Let's just pull the money out and go again the year after. And I think, at that point, you don't know what you don't know, but I knew that I was getting bored of doing the same thing over and over again. You
were at about 30 people, were you, within 5 years?
Yeah, we got to 30 people after 4 or 5 years. Get the sequencing right. So 2005, by probably about 2009, 10.
And your role? What was your role in that? Were you still billing, or were you?
I was still billing. Again, getting the model wrong. I was the main biller in the business. I was probably the one that did most of the infrastructure stuff around accounting, IT. I think being 15 years younger and at that point single, I could be the driving force in the business, and that suited everyone to let me get on with it. I got married in 2019. And that obviously changes things pretty dramatically. And I got diagnosed with cancer actually on a day before our first wedding anniversary. So my wife was 6 months pregnant this time. So you've got a new baby on its way. And
was that a year ago or 2 years? A year ago?
No, that was sorry, not 2000. I got married in 2009.
2009.
2009. Diagnosed with cancer in 2010. So.
Oh my God! So did you have to take some time off to go through treatment and things?
Yeah, I had 6 months out, had an operation, had my radiotherapy, was hopping in and out of hospital. Actually, in total, I probably only had a couple of weeks off, but I carried on going into the office after hospital, which in retrospect was really stupid. And I carried on billing because the company was struggling without me.
How the hell? But let's just stop a sec. How the hell do you? I can only empathize. I actually got a scare last summer, and I'd had to go for like, I had a lump and had it assessed and things like that. They told me they thought it could be, and it ended up being a blood clot. It was random, but really made me, think about things. How did you carry on working when you're going through, when you've got, you're recently married, you got a baby on the way, and you find out that? How the hell did you focus?
Yeah, it's pretty. I mean, look, again, you look back on some of the things you do when you're younger, and you do think you're a bit stupid, right? And I think I was definitely in the stupid camp of not getting my priorities right. Carried on working, definitely focused on the business, didn't really focus on having a newborn child. And part of it is the fear of, if it's potentially game over for me, then who's going to provide for the family? And partly, it was your first baby, right? You're 25 and you set this up, you poured everything into it. I mean, you know what it's like running Hoxo, right? It takes up so much of your day thinking about the business and breathing and living the business. I just didn't want to see it collapse. I guess that's the hard thing when you look back at it overall. And then ended up leaving the business to start Dartmouth. You go with that mindset.
Did you get through cancer while still being there, or did you leave during the treatment?
No. So I had cancer treatment, came back after about 6 months, and came back pretty determined that I couldn't go back to doing the same thing. So had a pretty upfront conversation with the guys around, saying, look, things need to change, and I'd like them to change. And they were pretty resolute in saying we're kind of pretty happy with how it's going. So we had a pretty tortured 6 months trying to manage my exit.
Wow. And how did they treat you and cope with, while you were going through such a difficult ordeal? Did they support you with that?
Yeah, I can't say they didn't. We weren't best mates, but at that point it was pretty collaborative, and I think they were generally pretty good. I mean, the reality was the business needed me at the time to keep going. Yeah. And I guess where it got trickier was talking about me wanting to change the business and wanting to grow it, and them saying we're happy. Then it became sort of headbutting for sort of, I guess, roughly 6 months. We were trying to work out how do we work our way forwards.
So I'm interrupting today's episode to introduce today's sponsor, which is District 4. Some of you who listen to The Rag may have listened to the episode I did in season 4 with James Johnson. James was the outwardly facing CEO of Nickel Curtain Group, who sold in 2020 and has recently started a company called District 4. Now, after the episode, James and I spoke, and my passion for this model, for this idea, is incredible because I've been the person that he's looking to work with. So when we discussed partnering with the show, it was a no-brainer for me. District 4, for those of you that don't know, is a brand new business model, and it's effectively a community of independent top billing recruiters that work under the banner of District 4, but run their own life. So post COVID-19, there's going to be we know there's a hell of a lot of top recruiters out there that have been working independently, more so than ever before. And there's a lot of people in the industry that don't necessarily love the whole people management bit. They're not managers, they're not directors. They just want to be really good recruiters. Now, traditionally, the only option for you as an individual like this has been to start your own agency. And there's a reason why 90% of the recruitment agencies in the world are sub 10 staff, is because most people who do this start a recruitment agency having been a top biller, not a manager, and then they build something that around them is not necessarily what they set out to do, and they're not built for scale that way. Whereas District 4 is a community of top performers who all work together and support each other. So if you're billing at least 200 grand and you're a niche recruiter, you can be a member of District 4, which means you effectively will recruit under their banner and be surrounded by other top billers. So you will be in like a daily contact and support network with other people billing the same sort of money at a similar point in their career, who each want to have an amazing life. So none of you are going to be interested in building teams. It's going to be about billing as much as you can, about doing the best job you can, and living the lifestyle you want, going on as many holidays as you want, finishing work when you want, living and working wherever you want, but knowing that your back office is supported, your legal, your compliance, your payroll, all the crap that recruiters don't really want to do. And believe me, when you start a business, it does bog you down. All of those things are taken away. James and his team will manage that. But not only that, they will coach you. James is an executive mentor. He works with startup founders. He helps people. He's also, spent some time with me recently as well, which has been incredible. So he will not only make sure that your back office is taken care of, but the business will coach you, mentor you, and surround you. That's the key. It'll surround you with A players, other top billing recruiters that are on the same path. It's like joining a Premier League club. All right. You don't join a Premier League club and then be in the first team with some juniors that haven't got the talent. Recruitment agencies across the world are exactly like that, whereas this is not. It's only for people billing 200K or more. So if you thought your only option was to start your own agency or to stay in your business and go down some corporate ladder you didn't fancy, you need to speak to these guys. Go to www.district4.io/Hoxo. That's www.district4.io/Hoxo. On there, you'll see more information about their membership, how to get involved, and register your interest. Within days, James will be on the phone. You'll have a conversation about the opportunity, and you might be one step closer to being in control of your destiny. Don't wait now. Make that contact and change your life post-COVID for the better. How does going through cancer, circa age of 30 with a newborn on the way, and how does that change your priorities in life? How does it change the way you think? What impact did that have on you, do you think?
I'd love to say that you cherish every moment and you really look after your family. Honestly, I don't think it. I think you get, as you get older, you get a bit maybe a bit wiser. Maybe definitely get a bit bolder. I think that
I've just got grayer every day. I don't get the bald.
Yeah. Take grey over bald every day of the week. I think, how did it change you? Honestly, I don't think it did massively. I think I've mentioned potentially becoming a vicar. From a faith point of view, it crystallizes. I'm a Christian. It crystallizes, your certainty of hope. If you believe in something and what you ultimately trust in, and that did help. Help me knowing that if I did die, I believe in a resurrection and a salvation. So that helped. Mm-hmm. But from a practical day-to-day point of view, I think like everyone else, got a bunch of things wrong. Got my priorities wrong, and went back to work far too early.
I can imagine though, knowing what I'm like with my business, I can imagine in a way it also could help having something to focus on that, rather than sitting there all day thinking about what could happen to yourself, you've got a business that's moving, that stimulus every day, isn't it? It's something that, and you said it before, it is your first baby. I completely empathize with that. I've took certain things really personally, which don't need to be taken personally. And I've thought, why do I get so? And then as my mentor said, it's like a fucking child. Like, it's like a child. You've started a company. It's just like having a child. So I totally get it. So talk us through that 6-month period then. What did you need to do to negotiate out of a business you'd founded and been so instrumental in growing?
Yeah, I think I don't know what the guys would say, but I think in retrospect it was pretty obviously on the cards. I'd said to them over a number of years that I'm not super happy with where the business is going. And to be fair to them, they'd said from early on that they wanted a lifestyle recruitment business. They didn't want it to be a big thing. And I think broadly in our industry, you've probably got three types of recruitment business, and the one that we see more often than not is a lifestyle recruitment business. Whether someone would call it that or not, you're basically running it for a dividend every year. And this is one of my sort of defining things in life. I think life is short, and I don't think money is for most people, it's not the reason they get out of bed. And I think a lot of people in our industry, we recruit them on the basis that you want to earn money, and I think that attracts a lot of people in the industry. Probably keeps very few in the industry. I think what keeps people is probably environment, culture, the buzz of doing a deal, competitiveness. But I think what can keep people long term in the industry is the idea that you can have a genuine career path. And I think a lot of people on your podcast have said that actually recruitment is brilliant. It's a great leveler. In terms of it doesn't matter what background you're from. And it's great. It's loads of opportunities for you if you go into a corporate environment to change your job every couple of years and to be challenged in a different way. And unwittingly, I think that's what I wanted. I wanted to grow a business to find out how good am I at actually running a business, not how good am I at recruitment ultimately. And I think as I left Cornell, initially it ended up being pretty sort of relatively amicable in terms of we carved things up. It became less amicable as Dartmouth grew pretty quickly. But that, I guess the starting point for Dartmouth was that we wanted a business where good people could grow quickly within our framework.
So you left the business, and then how long till you could start your next venture?
Well, the planning was about 6 months, and so I think from an initial conversation with the guys back in January 2012 to launching Dartmouth July 2012, we launched the week of the London Olympic opening ceremony. That's
literally the time I moved back to the UK, August 4th, 2012, when I landed back from Australia, and then I got into my recruitment job in London in September. So I remember that so well. That period. So you say we? Who did you start the business with at the time?
So I had, I think we had eight people on day one. So 7 people that worked with me at Cornell who came with me, or 6, I think, and a chap called Tim, who I'd known for a long time, who worked for a competitor, who had to tell him that actually there's no job for you at where you think you're joining whilst you're out in the garden for 6 months. But there might a startup with no money if you're willing to join us.
So did you finance it all yourself? You didn't go out and get any investment?
Yeah, no, I took a loan from family, secured against the property. That was a couple $100,000, and that got us through for the first next couple of months.
So you literally, you've made a statement by doing that, haven't you? That this is not going to be. There's been a couple of people I've interviewed through this show, and they've gone like that. There was a guy, Steve Rawlingson, up in the Northeast, I interviewed in season 1. Samuel Knight Associates in the oil and gas sector. I think he left his business with 9 or 10 people on day one, and it just went for it. And the pace they grew was insane. Because you like you say, you're not trying to just bill a bit higher. You go in, let's just get the money in the bank. Let's go from day one. So take us back to that time then, at the beginning of Dartmouth, your second incarnation, if you like. How did it feel?
I mean, you definitely feel more exposed. So I was 31 years old at this point, and you definitely feel much more exposed because it's definitely all on you at this point. Regardless of what I thought of my other 2 partners, they're definitely partners, and you share the burden, and it's a good feeling having that. And off the Logan the Pied Piper leads his merry band into another serviced office with no lights at this point and no ceiling. So. I think that first couple of weeks, everyone's looking at me going, what we signed up for here? Like, nothing works. And you're kind of trying to say, it's going to be fine, guys. Don't worry, it's going to be fine. In fact, it's going to be great. It's not going to be fine. It's going to be great.
And all these people were recruiters, experienced people, so they all had worked for a period of time with you, and you knew their capabilities, etc.
Yeah, anywhere from the first 6 months into recruitment up to circa a decade. Was roughly where we were.
So how was the first year in that business compared to the first year we talked about in the first?
It was tougher actually, because 2012 the market was still pretty tough in financial services. So it wasn't straightforward. But yeah, we had a decent first year. And the idea, it's amazing how these things shape you. But I was reading Jim Collins's From Good to Great at the start. Yeah. And we defined our ambitions as being, we're going to be number 1 or number 2 in every market we go into, and we're going to try and grow by top and bottom line by 30% every year. And those are 2 aims that we've got up on the walls in the office, and remain 2 of the aims of the business year on year: 30% growth, top and bottom line every year. Every year.
So what did you think about, like 10 years time back then? Were you thinking about 2021 or whatever? Was it, or because like one of the things last week's episode with James Kahn was really interesting when I asked James, did you see that Alexander Mann scale at the beginning? And he said no. He said he just kept looking at the next step. So he'd go from $1 million in revenue to $1 million in profit, and that's kind of how I think I've done what I've done. I'm nowhere near the level you're at, but did I really set out to have the business I have today? no. And in a year things have transformed so much. So I feel like I'm always looking at that next step. But what's been your ingredient to it, I suppose, over the last 10 years?
I think it's very similar. You look at the next step. The only thing that changes over time is your view on how far the next step can take you changes. So when you start out, and I think I listened to part of James's one, you think about the first £1 million profit, or the first million revenue, and then it's the first £1 million profit, and then the first million cash in the bank.
Yeah.
And we had a similar journey in terms of 30% growth year on year. It's easy when you're 8 people. It gets harder when you're 30. It gets harder when you're 150. The one aspiration I had early on, I said, look, we're gonna be backed by private equity. We're gonna do a PE deal in the first 10 years. And obviously, everyone in recruitment thinks about having some sort of exit at some point. And I was pretty determined that we'd work towards that. And as that became a reality, we took PE investment in 2018. It was still a reasonably small business, but the thing that has changed over the last couple of years is your horizon of where you can go. So first of all, we talked about being a business that could be worth 20 million quid, and then we said, okay, we'll try and be a business worth 100 million quid, and we can see that on the horizon in the next couple of years. So now I start thinking, okay, well, can we go from 100 million to 300 million in the same time span that's taken us, and things start to accelerate, and in some ways get easier over time.
Well, one question I've got for you. I was listening to a podcast with Eddie Hearn from the boxing space, and talking about it was quite similar to what you said, 100 million, 200 million. He's talking about these numbers and he's got this aspiration to be bigger than the UFC, which is where I think it's sold for 8 billion or something. And the host of the show was like, why? And he couldn't answer it. Like he had no reason other than to beat the UFC, right? So my question to you is, like, why do you want to get to 100 million and maybe 300 million? Like, what's driving that? Like, why do you even need that in your life?
You definitely don't need it, right? But if we get, and it's definitely not money. We go back to why do we get out of bed in the morning? I think that the thing that I find super interesting now, and as I said, I think we can look at our sector and be really proud of our sector. But you could, it's interesting working out how good am I? How good am I at business? Not initially how good am I as a recruiter? How good am I as a team leader, as a manager? How good am I at running a business? And then not just in the recruitment world, can I transcend that, and do I stack up well against the rest of the industry industries out there? So I think that's where it gets you're kind of just testing yourself, and it's not, I don't view it as a competition. Do I need to sell a business for a quid more than Adam Buck? It would be nice just to tell him that I've done it. But it's more about the journey is interesting, right? It's knackering, but it's
you remind me of like the way you're talking. It's a bit more like an athlete, like like a David Goggins type. Like, could I push myself further? Not. I don't think he cares whether he's in a race with people. It's more about his own body. Can he push his own body further? And you're looking at, can you push yourself and your business further? That's the vibe I'm getting.
Yeah, and it's super fun, right? It's really, really fun. And we talked about this, being another child, and these things are incredibly personal to you, the thing about lockdown that I've missed seeing people. I've really missed seeing our people, and all the pastoral stuff that goes with running a recruitment company. But I've missed proverbially getting your arm around someone's shoulder and saying it's going to be okay. Right? We'll be fine. Just keep the beat.
I know that feeling. So take me back to the early days of Dartmouth then, and because one of the things you've said over and over again is you wanted to prove you were good at business, not recruitment. So how did you? What changes did you make the second time round to ensure it wasn't you just doing £1 million with a lot of resources or whatever? How did you become a business owner rather than a self-employed recruiter?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that we're all recruiters at the end of the day, and I'm a recruiter, and we have some habits and traits that stop us being successful, right? And one of them is generally our own ego around wanting to be a big fella.
Yeah.
And that's your calling card for validation from the floor.
Yeah.
And I think I can probably view Dartmouth in certainly early stage Dartmouth in two phases. phase one was everyone's a biller, and what matters is who's the biggest biller. And
were you involved in that as well? Did you go back into
I
that mode?
I was still billing, and I still bill a bit now, but it's immaterial to what's actually going on in the group. And the second phase was saying that actually, who are the heroes in our business? And I think we've got two sets of heroes, and one's more visible than the other. So the billers are heroes because they're the ones that ultimately probably earn more annual comp. But your managers and your leaders are the quiet heroes who go around doing quite often a slightly thankless task, but a really, really important and necessary task. And that original thing, right, those people going through that journey have a more traditional corporate career path than people who want to rinse and repeat on recruitment every year.
Yeah. So how did you, can you remember when you stepped out of that performer and became more of a leader and thought about working on the business rather than in the business?
Yeah, I think it was circa 2016, 2017. So we'd grown, pretty quickly. We'd hit that 30% year-on-year growth every single year. And then 2015 to 2016, we got stuck at 30 to 40 into that classic, 30 to 42 down to 33, back up to 40. And we did that yo-yo for 18 months. And it was a pretty slow realization, frankly, over 18 months, saying, okay, something needs to change. And the thing that needs to change is me. It's not, I can keep trying to get everyone else to change around me, but it's me that needs to change. So we just took a step back, more or less collectively, and worked out, okay, what infrastructure are we going to need to take that step forwards? What do we need to invest in? And I guess crucially, the thing that, pulling me away from clients, that changed the dynamic as well, because it actually creates a lot of breathing space for people to say, okay, that's my responsibility to go out and win work. It's not Logan's, or a cluster of senior individuals. It was a really painful 18 months because we turned over a lot of people who'd signed up for not being in a recruitment business. Obviously they knew we were recruitment, but it's like, we don't want to act like another recruitment business. Sales isn't anywhere on the job spec, Logan. I didn't sign up for that.
Wow.
Because I'm going to execute the work you bring in. And we went through that journey for 18 months and came out the other side. And I remember, let's get this right, Christmas 2016, we had a really, really bad Christmas party. When we always do a quarterly presentation, and we've always been very open about these are our results, this is what money we've made, etc. So, and again, one eye on thinking we'll come under more scrutiny and maybe be a PLC one day. So we've always been pretty open about results and revenue. At Christmas 2016, the Christmas party, it was really flat. You're just thinking people have been really beaten up. And I was trying to tell people, so I think we've really turned a corner, guys. I think next year we're going to have a really good year because you could just feel it, and you can look at some of the data, and I think the signs are good, and you can just see everyone's like, don't believe you at all. Just cannot believe it. But then 2017 ended up being a really good year.
A final interruption to today's episode to introduce Vincere. Vincere is the all-in-one CRM ATS platform built for the recruitment and staffing industry. Now, I first heard about these guys about a year ago. The amount of prospect recruitment agencies and clients I was working with that were telling me they were moving over to Vincere, I had to look into it. And what I found was a business that had a global reach with multiple offices around the world. So they've got this follow the sun methodology, which allows them to support recruitment businesses wherever you are and be in your time zone. But the technology that they've invested in is becoming a disruptor in the space. More and more recruitment businesses are doing this to give their recruiters a competitive advantage. They broke into the G2 Crowd's momentum grid as a market leader based on their reviews from their customers. So the agencies that are using this platform are raving about it. Now, if you're a RAG listener and you're thinking about changing CRM, or you're a new business looking to launch with a new CRM, then I would get in touch with these guys, because if you mention that you're a RAG listener, they're doing an amazing deal. By visiting www.vincere.io/RAG, you can get an exclusive deal which offers 2 months completely free on a 2-year commitment, or 3 months completely free on a 3-year commitment. This applies to all licenses that you've either signed up for now or that you'll add in the duration of the contract. So get on there and have a look. Finally, if you're listening and you're a recruiter and you're thinking, I want to move into a more of a business development role, and I'd like to keep hold of my recruitment knowledge. Well, these guys are recruiting for a BD person, well, multiple roles in both Sydney and London right now. So if you've got a strong recruitment background, you want to move into BD and you want to work for a fast-moving tech business that's helping people like you right now, then get in touch via their website because they're hiring today. Back to the show. You got out your own comfort zone. That's what I picked from that. How did you, what was that like, going from being the person controlling everything to stepping away and allowing that breathing space? Like, how can you remember how you managed that and the difficulties you faced?
I'd love to say it was really smoothly executed. I think, look, we learned along the way, right? You know, and that's one of the problems with the industry. You know, people, you kind of learn on the job, and a lot of it, you know, that whole problem. I think Tim Cook repeats this over and over again, saying you don't know what you don't know, right? Yeah, one of the downsides of recruitment is because we're so competitive with one another. That sharing of the journey and sharing of the highs and lows and how can you help people. There aren't that many groups out there that do it, you know, and there are a couple now, and I think they're really brilliant actually for that. But my view is that, you know, at that point there's a lot of trial and error. We knew something had to change. We tried a bunch of things. Some of it worked, some of it didn't. You know, we started focusing really heavily on L&D as an example, and saying, okay, we talk about having a career path. You know, soup to nuts, how are we going to grow, you know, salespeople, how are we going to grow leaders. Had a couple of iterations of that till we got it right. You know, but
how big do you think a recruitment company should be when it starts to invest in those things? Those are ancillary services around, you know, operational improvements, and L&D is a big one.
I think L&D, as soon as you start hiring inexperienced people, you know, I guess as soon as you go beyond everyone as being a salesperson and you're hiring in grads. So if you're hiring grads, I think you need L&D, whether it's, you know, in-house or outsourced. As soon as you start asking people to manage, I think they need training on it. You know, the age-old problem of good billers don't make great managers. Yeah, people need training on it, and that's where I think Dartmouth is really good. You know, I think our sales training is okay, but the bit that I think we're great at is that management and leadership training.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and I think there's so many recruitment companies that will hold on as long as they can before they invest in those things. So, you know, they can burn good people. They can really put pressure on people when, you know, a small investment in some you know, outsourced training or whatever. I went on the Nicky Coffin course back in the day on, I think it was called Centered Excellence, as I got into team leader manager role at Venquis, and it was brilliant. You know, it was like you said, it was the best bit about it. We were like the biggest team there. There was about 5 of us, and there's about 15 in the group. So 5 from my company. But I just loved meeting people from different companies. That was the best bit. Just listening to how they approach things and getting a day out of the grind of doing the same shit every day. And I wonder why there's not more of those clubs and things for that layer, that management layer, because there is quite a lot out there now for the owner. There's quite a lot of communities for recruitment owners, but there's not as much for that layer below. I believe my old colleague Hisham is trying to do that through his recruitment mentors network. So I hope that works, because there's thousands of managers and leaders in the businesses that could be future. I mean, they don't all have to leave. They could have a great career, but they probably feel like they need to leave because they're not getting that support or that network.
Yeah, I think too many recruitment owners end up thinking of them like cash businesses, right? Because, you know, I mean, you'll know the stats, but, you know, what is it, 36,000 agencies in the country, something like that. How many are bigger than 30 people? You know, 10%.
Yeah, it was 81% of sub 10 staff.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, to getting above 30, I think there's well less than 10%.
Yeah, and so that people don't really think around. They don't think about, you know, the investment that's going to be required, because they think of them as cash businesses, and they're run as cash businesses. So that, you know, £4,000 or £5,000 on an expensive piece of training may not be needed in a 10-person business, but if you aspire to it being bigger, you're going to need great managers and great leaders, and those people need to be invested in. Look, we definitely, we had some bad spend along the way. We were chucking money out the door trying to see what works. some of the, so again, some of the stuff that we learned from outside our industry, talking to other people, saying, what do you guys do if you're a people-based business? How are you going to train your salespeople up? And then we did this thing at Dartmouth where we've got culminates in a mini MBA with London Business School, which we stole that idea from St James's Place, they have St James's Place. I know it gets a bad press if you read the Times, but the history of that business, it was a hardcore sales business. They were taking their high rollers down and kind of leasing cars for a month. It was proper like recruitment style sales. And then they have a FTSE 100 business. And thought, well, we're going to professionalize some of this now. So how are they going to train some of their bigger practice leaders? And so they did this thing with London Business School and tied it up there. And I was talking to one of my mates that works there, and he was saying, oh yeah, I've just done this really great thing with London Business School. So put me in touch with them. So I spoke to them, and obviously it all sounds very good. So how big's the check going to be? So well, London Business School is quite expensive, and you kind of get the pricing, and your heart sinks. It's just so expensive. But at that point, our chairman said, look, you're going to need to spend this kind of money if you're going to go through the next term and the next part of the journey. You're going to need business leaders that are capable of doing more than what they currently see and can learn on the job. And for me, that's been one of our game changers. And I remember trying to get other people in the industry excited to come and kind of basically help shoulder the cost on it and send some of their staff on it. And it's just too big a spend for most businesses to. And I guess the thing that as salespeople, we like instant results, we like quicker results, and investing in something where you can't have a guaranteed ROI on it or a quick turnaround. So I'm going to have a better manager. What if they leave the industry and go somewhere else eventually? Is always the pushback.
Oh, it's like our academy program. We're now coaching about 3,000 recruiters around the world on how to, build a brand on LinkedIn. And the first question we get asked is, how many deals are they going to do? I'm like, how many deals are they going to do? Like, we're coaching them to create content and promote themselves. I can't quantify that. I can guarantee that we're going to see X amount of uplift in profile views and engagement, and they're going to, but then when you look at the spend on LinkedIn from recruitment businesses on a monthly, it's huge, and then we worked out about 50% of recruiters spend about 50% of their day on LinkedIn now. So you're spending 50% of your working time on a platform you're spending a fortune to have access to. And then when I say, like, do your teams know how to utilize one of the main focuses, which is producing content? And they say no. I'm like, well, isn't it worth a small investment per head to get their head around that? And the people that do are clearly thinking further ahead. The ones that don't, I kind of just think, well, you'll get there eventually. You're going to need it at some point. But I totally, marketing is quite similar. You just got to subscribe to the long play and believe in it. So that investment with LBC, London Business School, so not LBC, you're not on the radio. That focus to get above that 40 head barrier that was kind of, a ceiling for you, if you like, in 2017. How did the business go in 2018-19 after going a bit more seriously into that investment of people?
Yeah, we kicked on. So as I said, up to 2016, we plateaued at 40, and then we kicked on. We started hitting that 30% growth year on year. I think we went to 40-45% year on year.
Wow.
We took investment from Literacy Capital June 2018, and we were a business making £2 million profit at that point. And fast forward 18 months, and we've more than doubled in size. Through one acquisition, but also organically.
So what was that like? I've spoke to a lot of owners recently about this, but from the likes of James Brown at Storm 2 and Tim Cook, etc. But did you go out and look for that investment at that point? Did you go out to find that player when you were £2 million profit business, or did that come to you through the business network?
It was a mixture of both. It's funny how these things happen. 3 million was the number that we'd always thought, and I'd always been told by ex-colleagues in corporate finance. I remember having this conversation with I won't mention him, but a mate of mine said, look, 3 million, that's the number, then you're probably backable. And he was used to doing slightly bigger deals. And then I had a lunch with a guy that I'd placed who operates in our sector. Ed said to me, he said, look, I think at 2 million, you probably could go and do something actually. So I said, look, I think we're 1 year away from it, but tee up 5 conversations and we'll see what happens. We had tentative offer from a client, and then I met Literacy, and I just really like the way they approach things. I like their style. I think so far, well, I hope they'd say this, but 2.5, 3 years in, it's been a really happy marriage so far.
What's their pitch to you at that point? Like, what do they say they can do for you to close that deal?
I think the thing that they've done is they open up your horizons to what's possible, and our investor, it's been a really good blend of being, we'll let you run the business as you want to run the business, and we'll give you advice as and when we see fit that there needs to be advice, but you carry on doing what you're doing, and at no point have I felt that we're doing something I'm not comfortable with or I don't like what's going on. It's been pretty collaborative, which I think, things are going well. The best partnerships are collaborative. Probably now and then there's been things that they may not have been happy with or I might not have been happy with, but broadly 2.5 years in, it's been a really good journey. And I think again, in recruitment, I think a lot of people think about what's the best price I can get and get out, and it can be a house of cards quite often. I've never thought like that, partly because I'm still on the journey. I'm still a major shareholder in the business, but I also just thought it's not a good way to do business, right? The best scenario is where everyone wins, and that means you win. You win, a group of other people win, but you don't win as much, but we all win together. That just feels more like the right thing to do and more enjoyable winning with others than doing it all by yourself.
Does it feel different though, being a solopreneur this time round, being the sole founder, and now having those backers involved? Does it feel a bit like the partnership model you had before? Does it have similarities to that?
Yeah, I'd say that, but I think we've built a really great management team along the way, and I've worked with a number of our directors for over a decade now, and we've hired some cracking people along the way who've really grown with the business. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's been, and I'm not just saying that, but I've really, really enjoyed working with that group of people over the last 8 years, and particularly the last 3 or 4 years, and seeing people grow, and then quite often seeing their potential before they see it, and seeing where they could go to. And if you've got a vision for the business in your head and how big it could be or where it could go, then thinking, okay, well, that's where they don't know it yet, but that's where their career could head into. And I think there's a good number of case studies in our business of people who never thought they'd be doing what they're doing today when they first set foot onto the sales floor.
No, I definitely didn't think I'd be doing this back in the day when I started recruitment either. So why Pure Search? Why did you go out and acquire a business was it last year or the year before you said that happened?
September 2019. So you could say canny timing.
So talk us through that then. What happened there?
Look, after doing the Literacy deal, I guess the model is strong core organic growth in Dartmouth, and we'll selectively look to acquire other businesses where we can operationally help them go faster through investing in the business. And we go back to the original premise. A lot of businesses are run as lifestyle businesses, even ones that are pretty big. So ones that Pure was about 100 people and 20 years old when we acquired it. We allowed the 2 founders to cash out, and I think COVID they held reasonably firm, and I think we'll see strong growth in that business this year. And the mindset, and I think the narrative changes for around saying, look, what could we make this year as a dividend and pull out and go again, versus if we make, let's say, 2 million quid, how much can we put back in to just help you double that next year? Yeah.
So are the 2 owners involved still, or have they left when they cashed out?
I think they're currently working their golf handicap, which is given last year was a smart move.
Yeah, I bet they're sat thinking, got out at the right time.
Grinning like Cheshire cats. Yeah.
Tell me then, how was life like for you in March 2020? You've just, you've got investment now. You got a backer. You've just acquired a business. You got, the circa, almost 200 people to be responsible for, and across 2 businesses. One that's still early on in its infancy in the relationship, and then we go into the worst global, the pandemic that's not been seen for 100 years. How did you cope with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really surreal, isn't it? Thinking back to that time. I remember taking the tube home the day of Rishi announcing furlough, and unless you're a missionary, no one knew what furlough was, right? So
no, it's a word we heard, right?
Exactly. So I think the fascinating thing that, for everyone that survived it, and I don't want to underplay it, because obviously there's still a lot of people on furlough, and there's a lot of industries that have been really affected by it, and obviously a lot of lives that have been affected by it. But the fascinating thing when you look back on it is how quickly we were learning on the job, and transitioning our businesses into completely different models. And by and large, particularly in our sector, generally how resilient we were, post the first quarter. So March, April, May were pretty unpleasant. I kept the same routine all the way through last year. So wake up at 6, instead of going to the gym, had a shower, went for a walk every day, got onto phone calls to various people around the world, and then just work a 14, 15-hour day, and rinse and repeat. And we were learning pretty quickly, and all the data and all the signs were pretty bad, right? Job flow dried up, and it bottomed out in May, and we made 1 month of a trading loss in May, and then from June, July onwards, we started to feel a bit more optimistic about the world, and couldn't call it, but we started to think, okay, we could start hiring again, and then Q2, Q3 last year, we put out a number of offers, and I think Q4. By Q4 last year, we ended up having our third best quarter ever in Q4, and then Q1 this year has been our best ever quarter. But the bounce back was pretty aggressive and I think that surprised everyone.
Yeah, I think across the board that's a similar story, really, isn't it? Like, whenever I speak to people, the fear was there. The reaction from our sector was rapid. Like the transition. I hate the word pivot, but there was a bit of that people did. I launched the Academy program at the beginning of it. Literally a year ago in this weekend, or Easter Monday was the day I literally worked and planned the whole thing out, and then built the following couple of weeks and launched in May. And that's become a business within itself now. It's a second, completely its own entity in our organization, and it's crazy. But the amount of owners that got on board with that and were learning things and trialing things themselves is real. I'm really proud of the sector in the last 12 months. Really, really proud. What do you think the next 12 months looks like, both for yourself and for the UK recruitment sector, in light of where we are today?
Well, I think the UK recruitment sector, if you look at some of the data, if you're not doing retail, I think it's generally looking pretty healthy, isn't it? And I think that my guess would be, and I'm no economist, but my guess would be we're going to see a pretty strong bounce back in terms of return of the economy this year and next year. And there is a lot of institutional money in particularly in the city, and I guess that's what we focus on, what we see. But post Q2 last year, the banks had a good year. They're seeing a lot of activity in the capital markets this year, and there's a lot of money floating about chasing a small number of good assets, which I think is going to push asset prices up. So what we see in the housing market is probably what we'll see in the recruitment market, particularly with in the square mile in London. And then for Dartmouth and Pure, I think we'll see good, strong core organic growth. If we can find another acquisition that makes sense for the group in the next 6 to 12 months, that'll be great. And then we'd love to start thinking about the IPO in the next 12 to 18 months.
Wow, so exciting! And what's your life personally? You mentioned about missing your people. Are you now starting to meet and venture into the office a couple of times a week or whatever? What's it like for you?
Yeah, I think we've kind of said to people, if you need to go in for mental health reasons. We've not officially opened up the office. I think from April the 12th we'll start to think about it. I'm definitely going to go in to get a haircut. That's the first thing I'm doing, and then. Yeah, look, I don't know where we'll land, and I'm actually quite reluctant to say this is going to be our official policy, because my guess is for this year, whilst we're in and out of bouncing around, government enforced restrictions to what we can do, some sort of flexible working makes perfect sense. But my guess is in a normalized world, or a more normal world, people will fall onto coming into the office more often than not through their own volition, because they'll realize what they miss and what they actually want. And I think working from home clearly is fine, But in our world, in our environment, actually everything's a lot faster doing it in person. And if you're trying to do things at pace, which we are, you can't beat it.
I think it's as well like the support network of people in person. Like that's probably the one thing I miss the most is that, you know, just picking people up or being picked up there and then as something happens. Whereas now you've got to go, have you got 5 minutes? Well, actually, no, I'm in and checking someone's diary. They're in a Zoom call. They'll probably be out in an hour. Like everything's delayed. In some ways it's good because you get time to reflect on yourself a lot, but I'm bloody sick of reflecting on myself all the time. And you know, I don't think we'll go back because my business has gone international from, you know, I've not met half my staff. We've doubled the business in the last 12 months and a lot of my team are in the US and South Africa now. So I've not even met them. We're going to a global WeWork strategy where everyone's going to have WeWork passes and they'll feel like we're in a similar environment, and then we'll travel and meet the team and what have you and try and get everyone together every 6 months. But from a recruitment where everyone's in sales, my business isn't like that. Where everyone's in sales, you know, I totally agree that, well, it's going to be an interesting space next year. 2022 is going to be the time. Logan, I could talk to you all day about this. I think it's fascinating what you've achieved, and you're so humble as well. Like you literally just, you know, you'd never guess you'd achieve so much. I don't think you're just so relaxed with it. One thing I want to know is, like, if you were talking to a founder who's maybe 2 years in, guilty of being the control freak, who's trying to do everything, and you know, a bit like you might have been in the past, and I know I have been. You know, what advice would you give that person to be able to think a bit bigger, you know, and start to become a business owner rather than a recruiter with a surrounding network of resources or whatever?
Yeah, I think the first thing you've got to work out is what do you actually want to achieve, because you know, a lot of people, I go back to my original partners at Cornell, they've got what they wanted, right? They wanted to run a lifestyle business. They've got exactly that. And why would you want to change that if it works for you? And if that's, you know, life is pretty short and can be short. So do what fundamentally you're going to enjoy. And if you like that freedom of running a lifestyle business where you can come and go as you please a bit more, you can take as much holiday as you like, et cetera, stick to it. If you've aspired to something bigger and you're willing to change, and we go back to, you know, the training of, you know, being in the gym and what am I willing to put myself through to achieve, you know, a time or the body I want or whatever it is. If you're willing to do that, I think you know the industry actually is surprisingly friendly. You know, despite the bad rep, people are really helpful and willing to give up their time. And I'd say just go and find a couple of good mentors and pick their brains and find people who are willing to talk to you, and just get a download, right? Get a download of you know, all the stuff that can go wrong. Like people are pretty open about that, and all the stuff that you could get right. And then pick the best bits. You know, if there was one formula, we'd all just copy it, right? So, you know, if you know Adam Buck at Faden, you just go, well, we'll just do what Adam's doing, or you know, let's just copy that, or copy the Storm guys now, right? Let's just, and that's, you know, again, that's a particular model for a particular group of people, and it's going to, I think I've got no doubts that's going to work brilliantly for those guys again. But you know, our industry is full of so many different types of recruitment businesses done in different ways, and you've got to largely reflect the owner, right? So a lot of his personality, let's say, do something that you're comfortable with.
I like that. I agree with that. And what you mentioned, Good to Great, it's actually on my list. I've still not read it. What have you got? Any other publications, books, podcasts, anything you've listened to or read in the past that you think an aspiring owner of growth would benefit from?
I'm a sucker for these. I suck up these books, so I could give you a very long list. I'll tell you a book that I really enjoyed that's not well known. Is a book called Branded Gentry.
Branded Gentry.
Yeah, and that actually might be, but it's people whose names above the door. So Johnny Bowden, Orla Kearley, people like that. And that's a really interesting book about how your personality becomes the brand, and their business are a reflection of them and how you inhabit it. And that was quite interesting. I've got tons though. I've just read the Netflix book, No Rules.
I've got that. I'm on the go. I keep starting books and not getting into them though. I start the first chapter and then something else happens. So what did you think of that? Because that's all about culture, isn't it? And how they...
Yeah, it's all about culture. It's fascinating. I mean, it's very Silicon Valley. right? But the thing that you get from that, they say they've got no rules, but it's a high performance culture, and that's what rules ultimately. So if you're no good, you're out, and that's basically the only rule in the business.
What I'm listening to at the moment is something called Essentialism. So it's Greg McCowan, and I'm loving it. I'm almost done with. It's only like a 5.5 hour audio, but talks about doing less better, and the non-essentialists feel like they need to try and achieve everything and do everything and please everyone. Yeah, some of the most successful people are those that are comfortable with letting people down and saying no, like no to the following invite, no to this, no to that, to focus on what's most essential so they can have the most impact in the direction that they're going. I think it's like, you could do a lot of things average, or you could do one thing really, really well. So if you haven't read that, I would recommend it. I've loved that book. Logan, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. We've had a few comments. We've had Mark Levine said, really enjoying this, but I have a client visit at 2. We'll watch the rest later. Thank you both. Jean-Claude said, I went from being an ex-squaddy to accountancy recruitment in one jump, so I had to learn recruitment and accountancy at the same time. So, we've all had a different journey, but, I can guarantee that I've learned a lot from you and I've enjoyed it, and I'm sure my listeners will as well. So good luck for the rest of the year, and we'll get you back on at some point next year and find out how you've conquered the world at that point.
Never know. Maybe one day we'll do this in person.
Yeah, maybe, and you can interview me. I think let's turn it around. But guys, thank you so much for listening. Anyone on LinkedIn who's watching back live, anyone who's listening on the show, I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. I hope you've learned from Logan, and there's so much to take from that. I always say it, and Logan mentioned this. Our sector, we get so wrapped up in being in competitors and keeping things institutionalized in our organizations, but actually we're a hell of a lot stronger if we learn from each other. Well, even if you learn one thing and take it and implement from today's show, you're going to be better off for it. So I'm asking you to please share this episode, send it to someone colleague, boss, whoever, because together we will be stronger and we'll get through this pandemic and flourish. I'll be back again next Wednesday with another high-profile business leader in our sector. In the meantime, you stay safe, and I'll see you soon.